Hey there everybody, it's Mike DiLisio, and today I'm going to be reviewing the newest game in a line of games that have been around for quite a while, the Tiny Epic line. This is Tiny Epic Vikings. So how does this game stack up with other games in the series? Well, let's head over to the table. I'll give you a brief overview on how the game is played, then we'll come back here and I'll let you know what I think. Okay, here we see a game of Tiny Epic Vikings all set up. At the beginning of the game, you're going to randomly choose 3 god cards and place them up above the play area. There are other god cards that come with the game. Again, you just randomly choose 3 and put them at the top. You also are going to randomly assign a rune to each one of these. So in this case, Thor has this C rune here, if you can see, there we go. And Odin has N and Freya has F. There's also some setup that happens on the board here with initial placement of boats and things along those lines. The way the game is played is going to be played over 3 eras, and the player that has the most points at the end of the 3rd era is going to win the game. Primarily the points are going to come from the number of runes that you have collected throughout the game, both in these favor cards, which you can see they have runes on them, and also in these runes that begin populated on the islands that are going to be taken from the islands and sometimes taken from other players. The level of the god's fury, as it's called, that's what these are tracking, is going to be a kind of a strength meter to determine the value of the different runes. All right, so in the 3 rounds, you're going to always start with a drafting phase. And what this is going to show you here is that in the first era, you're going to have 4 cards you're drafting and you're going to go in a clockwise manner. Second era is going to be 5 cards, drafting counterclockwise. And in the 3rd and final era, you're going to draft 6 cards back to the clockwise method. So the drafting is very similar to other games you may have played before, like Sushi Go or 7 Wonders. Essentially, you'll have your 4 cards in the first area you start with. You put one face down in front of you. You pass the cards in the first area clockwise to that player. Player to your right is going to pass them to you. And you're going to do this 4 times until you have 4 cards. Once that happens in player order, this is going to denote whoever the starting player is. You are going to choose to play a card. So let's say that these are the 4 cards that I drafted. On your turn, you are going to always play a card either face up or face down below your mat here. And you're going to do them in order from left to right. Let's take a look at these cards. A couple of things to pay attention to. They're all going to have a rune associated with them that's in the upper left of the card. They're going to have a strength value, which is only going to be used if you play the card for battle. They're going to have a leader ability that you can do here. This is essentially an action. And then there is a rune action that potentially could trigger depending upon what you have out in front of you. So if you play a card face up, it means that you are playing it for the action right here. If you play it face down, that means that you are either starting a battle or joining a battle that somebody else has initiated. So that's how you can determine whether it's for a battle or for the action itself. So let's say, for example, I wanted to play for an action. I would do it face up, take that associated action, and then if I had the rune associated with this rune icon down here, I could do this rune action. This is saying you'd need an N card to be able to do this. So if this is the first card I played in an era, I would not be able to do that. However, you can see I have a card here that has an N rune. If I played this first, and then on a future turn, went ahead and played this, I now would have the N I need right here. This is what would be called an active rune. Active runes are either the runes that are on these tokens or runes that are cards that you've played in front of you. You have what are called passive runes, which are just going to be these favor cards. If you get one of these, you'll put it face down above your mat. You can have up to 3 of them, and those are only used for final game scoring. They're not used for multipliers or modifiers, things along those lines. So let's talk about the different actions briefly. This is a sailing action, and this is going to have a particular value applied for it. It might be ×2, it might be ×3. If I play this, what I'm able to do is move my ship around the board here. And you can see that you've got these islands that have the runes that begin the game on them, and it just tells you right there on the board what it starts with. You've got these little villages that are on particular port spots, and you've got these other port spots that are here, docking areas. So if I played this times 3 ship movement, I can move. These dotted lines are going to denote the different regions. So let's say, for example, I wanted to go into this dock spot right here. I can go 1, and it takes 1 to dock on an island. Okay, so that would be 2 of my movement. You can do up to 3. All right, at this point, I've got a couple of different options. The first thing is that I can raid that village. The cost to do so is listed here on the map, on the era mat, and in the first era it costs 1 iron to raid a village, second era 2 iron, third era 3. You start with 2 of each of the 3 resources, iron, food, and wood. So maybe I would spend my 1 iron, I would go ahead and I would put this village off to the left of my board. All right, now I've docked in that island, I have another option. I can bring settlers onto this island, okay? And I do that by spending food for each settler that I want to bring aboard. And I can bring aboard as many as I have here for the shipping action. So I could bring up to 3 settlers onto this island, cost of 1 food each. However, I started with only 2 food. So the best I could do would be to spend that 2 food and bring 2 settlers from my player mat onto this island. This is what's called boots on the ground. When you have either a settler on an island or your, I believe this is a temple, called a temple. This would also be considered boots on the ground. And when you do that, if you've got the most influence in the island, you can take that rune token as long as you have boots on the ground. Well, I do. No one else has any influence on the island, and the amount of influence is listed here on your player mat. Essentially, these are each worth 1, and the ship is worth a couple. So I can immediately take this rune and I keep this next to me. Now I've got actually 2 N runes at my disposal right now. And the other thing that's going to happen is that the fury of this god is going to go up 1. So essentially the value of this rune goes up. Anytime that a rune is stolen, either taken from an island, or if another player were to take this from me, you would increase the fury of the associated god. Okay, so that is the shipping action. Also, now that I have this village, either on this turn or a future turn, I could dedicate this village and do a particular thing. There are 4 actions over here that are going to be the ones I talk about, so I can do a second action. Or maybe I want to really bump up the value of this N rune now that I've got one, although I may not keep it. That would boost it up too, okay? You've got that for each of these, and then you've got actions over here that are corresponding to the ones I'm going to be talking about. All right, this is the harvest action. It's very simple. You can basically just get 4 resources of your choice in any order you want. You can go ahead and just bump those up along your track. This is the build action. That is going to be where you either are going to be bringing new ships out on the board, or you are going to be doing a temple. All right, actually, I'm missing one of my ships right there. There we go. You start with 3 on the board. If you want to build the ships, it is 2 wood, 3 wood, then 4 wood. If you want to build a temple, it is 5 wood or 7 wood. So let's say that if I wanted to build a ship, I can spend 2 wood, and then this ship can go adjacent in a fjord, adjacent to anywhere where I have presence, so maybe I'd put it right there, okay? Temples have to go onto a spot that you have a villager in. And you can place it right there, and this is going to give you 4 influence. It also, when you build these things, they're going to give you better harvests. So if you see here, once you get rid of a ship, or build a ship I should say, every harvest you get an extra food, and when you build the temples, every harvest you get an extra resource of your choice. And if you built them both, you'd get 2, and it would be the same with the ships. You get more and more food. Just improves your harvest action. That was build, sorry. And then the last thing here is settling, moving your settlers or exploring with your settlers. And this is saying that you can up to 2 times explore with a settler. So using these lines, if I wanted to, I could go here, and then I'd be able to get that rune, go here. Of course, probably you're not going to be able to do this early on, but later on, you'd be able to move them around and potentially wrestle control away from other players. If instead you play a card face down, if you were the first one in that era to do so, that means that you are initiating a battle and you play the card face down. What you're going to do is you're going to look at these favor cards and you're going to choose one that is on either the left or the right end, either above or below the board. So you essentially usually have 4 choices to go from. All right, so let's say that I wanted to initiate a battle and I'm battling over this favor card, which has the F rune, the N rune, and also the winner of this will get whatever those resources are. You place it right here to kind of let everybody know this is what the battle is over. And in subsequent turns, other players can choose to join the battle by playing a card face down or not. All right? When you do have a battle, everyone who is in the battle flips over their cards and they look at the value that is up there. If whoever has the most strength is going to win that battle, they're going to win this favor card. They'll immediately get the resources there, and then they'll place it face down above one of their 3 spots, and this is going to be used for endgame scoring. The losers of the battle, as long as they have participated in any way, are going to be able to get kind of a compensation, which is that they are going to be able to do whatever it says on the card there. So, for example, this Thor, for the losers of the battle, says that each other player must remove one of their settlers from an island of their choice. So they get a little bit of a boon there. All right, and then you're also going to be bumping up the fury of those gods every time that you do that. Some of the battle cards, some of the strength cards have modifiers. This is basically saying you'll have 3 strength times every N that you have. So if I had this N and this N, this would be worth 6. However, to use this one, you have to spend an iron, okay? Some of the cards will have things along those lines. This is a similar one here, okay? So you're going to continue to do this in player order, drafting your cards, playing the cards out, moving down the era until you get to the end of the 3rd era. And at that point, you're going to evaluate final scoring. And final scoring is going to be determined by the strength of the gods based upon the fury level that they have. And so here it shows you that the runes that you got from the islands, which are these tokens right here, for the highest strength god are each going to be worth 6, second strength 5, and third strength 4. And then your favor cards are going to be 5, 4, and 3 in descending order based upon the strength on the fury level of those gods. You would flip this over, be able to do a scoring track that way, and whoever has the most points at the end of the 3rd era wins Tiny Epic Vikings. Let's head back over and I'll let you know what I think. All right, well, there you see generally how a game of Tiny Epic Vikings goes. There are some things I left out. It was a very high-level overview, but you hopefully get the general gist of it there. So, as I mentioned in the intro, the Tiny Epic line of games have been around for quite a while, and I've reviewed a number of them in the past on this channel. I will state that in the last few years, I've found myself less and less enamored with some of the Tiny Epic games. And so I tried not to let that color my impressions at all when I came into this game. I wanted to, as I always do, try to have a completely open mind. But I do want to mention that the last few Tiny Epic games have not worked very well for me. So I was interested to see if this would kind of break that trend. There are a number of games that came out earlier in this line that I like quite a bit. Tiny Epic Quest is one of my favorites, and I also like Tiny Epic Galaxies, Tiny Epic Dinosaurs. There are a lot of games in line I like. Last few I haven't felt quite as good about. So first thing is, let's talk about the art and the components. Generally speaking, I have very positive things to say about this. The Tiny Epic line can be a little bit tricky when it gets into the idea of components, because the idea behind this is you're packing a lot of game into a very small box. And so what sometimes happens is that to do that, you have to make some concessions. Maybe some of the cards are a little bit difficult to read, or the iconography can be a little bit challenging. I didn't find that to be an issue in this particular game. I found the cards were all relatively clear. The size of the text was fine for me. There actually isn't a whole lot of text, but what text is there was easy enough for me to read. I really like the wooden components in this particular game a whole lot. The screen printed wooden meeples and the runes are all nice and chunky, very satisfying to kind of play around with. The biggest issue I had was with the board itself, and I'm just going to grab it here. So this is a tri-fold board, and it's the first time that a board has been included in the Tiny Epic line, and it's double-sided, one side for 4 players, the other for 1 to 3. The issue that I had with it is that no matter what I tried, I could not get this board to lay completely flat. I've tried the bending in opposite directions on the fold as much as I could without, trying not to break it, of course. It's not to the level that the game is unplayable by any means. I mean, I had no issues playing the game, but it was slightly frustrating that the board does not completely lay flat, at least in my copy of the game. And so that is something I did want to mention. Everything else, like I said, I really liked art and component-wise. So for the gameplay itself, this is a game that I think we would be foolish, I would be foolish to not mention what seems to be a pretty clear inspiration point for this game, which I think would be Blood Rage. Okay, so Blood Rage, an area control style game, drafting game where you are playing as Vikings. Okay, sure, there are some similarities here in the game, primarily in this idea of the 3 ages and your drafting cards to drive the action. So it would be foolish to say that there's no connection between these games. However, they feel quite different, honestly, and I'm glad that they do, because I think I would have been a little bit disappointed if this was, essentially a clone of Blood Rage, which is a game I like a whole lot. It has elements of Blood Rage that I like that is here too. In other words, I like drafting games. I like games where you're drafting cards and those cards can drive the action. What is different about this game is primarily in how the scoring works, and so that makes it feel significantly different than Blood Rage. And while the battle system has some similarities, they do feel different enough to me. I also like the fact that in this game, when you lose a battle, sometimes you'll go into a battle knowing you're going to lose it because you want the benefits on the God cards. Now, there are some similarities, and I'm not going to continue to talk about Blood Rage too much, but there are some similarities there where sometimes you'll want to enter a battle knowing you'll lose. But those are very specific times in the game. This, really, if you don't have an action you'd rather play, it's almost never a bad idea to at least go into a battle. You might win, and if you lose, you're going to get whatever the God card says for you there, and you're going to bump up the Fury track of that God too, which might be helpful for you if you've got runes associated with it. So while there are similarities, it does feel different enough. It stands on its own. I like how simple the actions are. I like the fact that the cards are kind of multi-use. It's very satisfying to be able to build up the runes that allow you to take those rune actions. I think that the cleverness and in the card play is the strongest element of this design, and it's quite clever. Like I really like, kind of the decisions you have to make. The timing decisions feel substantial to me, and they feel impactful. You might want to take a build action first, but then you realize that you can't do the rune action with that build card unless you play a different card first. And so being able to kind of try to manipulate that and be as efficient as you can in the card play, using those runes to kind of build and combo off of each other feels satisfying, and I do appreciate that. I also like the fact that it doesn't necessarily feel devastating when an island's control is taken from you or a rune is taken from you, because you have the opportunity to get that back. There are a number of different ways, and there are other ways to kind of, balance things out so that you feel like you are in the game. So all of that is positive. My biggest negative to the actual design and gameplay itself is honestly with the scoring, which is the part that I said earlier kind of makes it stand out the most from Blood Rage. The scoring is I feel a little bit removed from it. The actions that I'm taking it's not always very obvious how those actions are, translating to straight points. So you always have to be thinking of, okay, what runes am I sure to have, which are going to be the ones that are in your favor cards. You know you're going to have those unless you choose to discard them to play a different favor card. And then making sure that the gods associated with those runes are at the highest level they can be, because you're going to get more points that way. You essentially want runes of the highest strength gods. And so that's clear-cut enough. But I did feel like oftentimes I was getting kind of lost in the weeds. I was focusing on my actions, what actions I'm going to do, my most efficient way of playing cards, that didn't always translate to getting more points. So I guess, that is on me as a player. But certain games, the opacity of the actions to points are higher than others, and I felt like it was a relatively opaque scoring in this. But again, your mileage may vary there. For me, that was probably the biggest downfall of the design, and it wasn't a big one. Okay, the bottom line is that I'm very happy with this game. As I said early, I was trying to come into it with an open mind, but I did always have in the back of my mind, gosh, I feel like the last couple Tiny Epic games didn't work for me as much. This one is making the series come back strong for me. I'm going to be giving Tiny Epic Vikings an 8 out of 10, an easy recommendation. I feel like this game does a lot of things very well. It feels like a design that is fully impactful. In other words, everything you do makes sense. Scoring can be a little opaque, but otherwise, you're sailing, you're putting settlers on islands, you're building things to give you better harvest actions, you're harvesting things, all of it makes sense. It's very smooth. Not as many rough edges as I found in some of the other recent Tiny Epic games. It's relatively easy to teach and play. It does have a variant for the 2-player game, which some people don't like that. You have to have kind of like a little bit of a dummy player going on, but I do want to mention that is part of the design as well. And so, your mileage may vary on whether that is something that bothers you or not. But overall, really a solid game, one that I'm happy to come back to and play some more. And, there's enough variety in the game as well with the different god cards and things along those lines. All right, well, that's Tiny Epic Vikings. This is Mike DiLisio signing off from the Dice Tower Midwest Annex.